When a casually dressed black man walks into an upscale boutique, he's met with smug looks and thinly veiled insults. What the rude clerk doesn't know, the man he just humiliated is one of the most respected architects in the country. What happens next leaves the entire store stunned. Watch how quiet dignity shatters prejudice and teaches a lesson no one will forget. The air in Paris was crisp that October afternoon, carrying the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor near the Champs-Élysées. Damon Cole adjusted the collar of his worn leather jacket as he stepped into Maison Elegance, a high-end fashion boutique known for its exclusivity and sky-high prices. At 38, Damon was a celebrated architect. His sleek, modern designs dotted skylines from New York to Tokyo. But today, he wasn't dressed the part. Faded jeans, a plain black hoodie, and scuffed sneakers made him look more like a tourist than a visionary. Inside, the boutique gleamed with polished marble and soft lighting that danced off racks of tailored suits and silk dresses. Damon's dark eyes scanned the room, searching for a gift, something sharp and timeless for his sister's birthday. He'd barely taken 2 steps when a voice cut through the quiet. "Excuse me, sir," said a tall, thin man in a pristine gray suit, his tone dripping with condescension. Todd, according to his name tag, stood with his arms crossed, his pale blue eyes narrowing. "This isn't a museum. If you're just here to browse, I'd suggest the gift shop down the street." Damon paused, his lips twitching into a faint smile. He'd heard this script before. Different cities, same assumptions. His skin, a rich brown, and his casual clothes seemed to trigger a reflex in people like Todd. "I'm looking for a suit," Damon replied calmly, his voice deep and measured. "Something for a formal event." Todd's smirk widened. "A suit? From here?" He gestured to a rack where a single jacket cost more than most people's rent. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a department store. We cater to a specific clientele." The words hung heavy, laced with unspoken meaning. Damon's fingers tightened around the strap of his messenger bag, but his face remained unreadable. He could have walked out. He'd done it before. Let the ignorance slide and moved on. But something about Todd's smug certainty lit a spark in him. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder, sharper. "I'll take a look anyway," Damon said, stepping past Todd toward a display of midnight blue suits. He ran his hand over the fabric, feeling the quality, already imagining the lines and cuts he'd choose. Todd hovered nearby, his impatience growing. "Sir, I really must insist," Todd began, but he was interrupted by the chime of the door. A woman swept in, her auburn hair pulled into a sleek chignon, her tailored coat screaming old money. She was Claire Dubois, the boutique's owner, though Todd didn't seem to notice her yet. "Damon Cole!" Claire's voice was warm, cutting through the tension like a blade. She crossed the room in quick strides, her heels clicking against the floor. "I heard you were in Paris. What brings you to my little shop?" Todd froze, his smirk vanishing as Claire embraced Damon like an old friend. Damon returned the hug, his eyes flicking to Todd for a split second. "Just looking for a gift," he said. "And maybe something for myself." Claire laughed. "Well, you've come to the right place. Todd, why don't you fetch us some champagne? Damon's not just any customer. He's the man designing my new flagship store in London." The color drained from Todd's face. He stammered an apology, but Damon waved it off, his expression still calm. "No need," he said. "I'm used to it." Claire frowned, catching the edge in his tone. "Used to what?" Damon didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the suits, picking one up and holding it to the light. "This'll do," he said. And I'll take the tie over there, too. Gift wrap them. As Todd scurried off to obey, Claire leaned in. What happened before I got here? Damon shrugged. Same old story. He thought I didn't belong. Claire's jaw tightened. But before she could respond, Damon's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a text from his assistant. Meeting with the Paris Council moved up. They're ready to see your plans now. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his mind already shifting gears. The suit wasn't the only thing he'd be delivering today. Damon stepped out of Maison Elegance, the crisp Parisian air hitting his face as he slung the gift-wrapped suit bag over his shoulder. Claire had insisted on comping the purchase, her way of apologizing for Todd's behavior, but Damon paid anyway. He didn't need favors to prove his worth. The boutique's glass doors swung shut behind him, and he could feel Todd's eyes boring into his back from inside. Good. Let him stew. The text from his assistant still burned in his mind. The Paris Council wasn't just any client. They were gatekeepers to one of the most ambitious projects of his career. A cultural center in the heart of the city. A bold fusion of glass and stone that would redefine the skyline. Damon had spent months perfecting the design, sketching late into the night, ensuring every angle told a story. Now, they'd moved the meeting up, and he had less than an hour to get across town. He hailed a cab, sliding into the back seat as the driver, a wiry man with a thick Algerian accent, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Where to, monsieur? Hôtel de Ville, Damon said, pulling his tablet from his bag. He opened the blueprints, his fingers tracing the sleek lines of the structure. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement. A space where art, history, and community could collide, open to everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from. He'd fought for that vision, knowing full well the irony of designing inclusivity in a world that often shut him out. The cab jolted through traffic, weaving past tourists and locals alike. Damon barely noticed the Eiffel Tower flashing by in the distance. His mind was on the council, 7 stern faces who'd likely judge him before he even opened his mouth. He'd faced rooms like that before, all white panels sizing him up, their skepticism louder than their words. But he'd learned to let his work speak for him. When the cab pulled up to the Hôtel de Ville, its ornate facade loomed like a fortress. Damon paid the driver, tipped generously, and stepped out, his sneakers scuffing the cobblestones. Inside, the lobby buzzed with hushed voices and the clack of heels. His assistant, Maya, met him at the entrance, her braids swinging as she handed him a folder. They're waiting, she said, her voice low. And heads up, Councillor Leclerc's in a mood. He's already grumbling about outsiders meddling with Parisian heritage. Damon nodded, unfazed. Let him grumble. He'll see. The meeting room was a cavern of wood-paneled walls and high ceilings, the council seated around a long table. Leclerc, a wiry man with silver hair and a permanent scowl, sat at the head, his fingers drumming impatiently. The others, 4 men and 2 women, all in crisp suits, watched Damon with guarded curiosity as he set up his presentation. Mr. Cole, Leclerc began, his accent sharp. We've heard much about your unconventional designs, but Paris is not New York. We value tradition here. Damon met his gaze, unflinching. Tradition's only alive if it evolves. My design respects the past while building for the future. Let me show you. He clicked the remote, and the screen lit up with his vision. A shimmering structure of glass arches and stone pillars, its curves echoing the Seine. The room fell silent as he walked them through it. Public galleries, a rooftop garden, a plaza open to street artists and vendors. Every detail was deliberate, a quiet rebellion against the exclusivity he'd faced all his life. When he finished, the silence stretched. Then, a younger counselor, a woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "It's bold," she said. "But can you deliver?" "I always do," Damon replied. The clerk snorted. "Confidence is cheap, Mr. Cole. We've seen your resume. Impressive, yes. But you're not one of us. Why should we trust you with our city?" The question hung there, heavy with subtext. Damon's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "You don't have to trust me. Trust the work. It stood taller than any room I've walked into." A murmur rippled through the group. The woman smiled faintly, scribbling a note. Leclerc's scowl deepened, but he said nothing. The meeting ended with a promise to deliberate. A victory, however small. As Damon packed up, Maya whispered, "You nailed it. They're rattled." "Maybe," he said, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "But this isn't over." Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the city gold. Damon's phone buzzed again. A message from Claire. "Todd's mortified. Wants to apologize in person. Dinner tomorrow?" He smirked, typing back, "We'll see." He wasn't done turning tables, not by a long shot. The next evening, Damon stood in front of a full-length mirror in his hotel room, adjusting the cuffs of the midnight blue suit he'd bought from Maison Elegance. The fabric hugged his broad shoulders, the cut sharp enough to turn heads. He paired it with the silk tie he'd picked for his sister, its silver threads catching the light. Tonight wasn't just about dinner with Claire. It was a test. Todd's apology loomed like a tightrope, and Damon wasn't sure if he'd accept it or let the man dangle. He arrived at Le Bistrot Lumière, a chic restaurant tucked along the Seine, its windows glowing against the night. Claire waved him over to a corner table, her smile bright. Todd sat beside her, fidgeting with his napkin, his usual arrogance replaced by a nervous flush. Damon slid into his seat, his presence filling the space without a word. "Damon, thank you for coming," Claire said, pouring him a glass of Bordeaux. "Todd has something he'd like to say." Todd cleared his throat, his eyes darting up to meet Damon's, then dropping again. I misjudged you yesterday. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." Damon leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. "You didn't need to know who I was. That's the point." Todd flinched, but nodded. "I get that now. I've worked at the boutique for years, and I've been trained to spot the right customers. It's instinct. But it's no excuse." Claire watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. Damon took a sip of wine, letting the silence stretch. He could have torn into Todd, unloaded years of pent-up frustration. But what would it prove? The man was already unraveling. "Instinct," Damon said finally, his voice low, "is just prejudice with better manners. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you get one chance to fix it. Don't waste it." Todd swallowed hard, murmuring a quiet, "Thank you." Claire reached over, squeezing Damon's hand. "You're too gracious," she said. "I'd have fired him." "Maybe," Damon replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But I'd rather build something than burn it down." Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and rich food. Foie gras, truffle risotto, a dessert so delicate it melted on the tongue. Damon kept the conversation light, but his mind was elsewhere. The council's decision was due tomorrow, and it could change everything. If they greenlit his design, it'd be his biggest win yet, a legacy etched in glass and stone. If they didn't, he'd be back to proving himself all over again. Later, as they stepped outside, the Seine shimmered under the city lights. Claire pulled Damon aside. You're different, you know that? Most people would have made Todd grovel. Damon shrugged, hands in his pockets. He's not the real fight. The real fight's tomorrow. She nodded, understanding. You'll get it. They'd be fools to say no. The next morning, Damon stood in the Hotel de Ville's grand hall, Maya at his side. The council filed in, their faces a mix of stern and curious. Clerk took the lead, his voice clipped. Mr. Cole, we've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious, some say too ambitious. But we've decided to move forward, with conditions. Damon's pulse quickened, but he kept his cool. What conditions? You'll work with a local architect, Leclerc said. Someone who knows Paris. We want your vision, but grounded in our soil. It wasn't perfect, but it was a yes. Maya grinned, nudging him as the council dispersed. You did it, she whispered. They couldn't say no. Damon exhaled, the weight lifting, just a little. Not yet, he said. This is just the foundation. Back at his hotel, he packed for the flight home, the suit bag slung over his chair. His phone buzzed. A photo from Claire. Todd, head down, helping a scruffy-looking teen try on a jacket at the boutique. Her caption read, "He's learning." Damon smirked. Maybe he was. As the plane took off that night, Paris shrinking beneath him, Damon stared out the window. He'd won today. But tomorrow? Tomorrow was another room, another Todd, another Leclerc. The world wouldn't change overnight, not even with his buildings piercing the sky. But he'd keep designing, keep pushing, keep proving, not for them, for himself. And somewhere, in a boutique or a council chamber, someone else would wonder, who's next?